Hi, welcome to the second episode of Very Interesting with me, Chris Mejia, here with another pre-recorded intro because we recorded this episode at the beginning of the year and it is currently July, so some time has passed. I am so excited for you to hear this episode. My guest is so amazing. The conversation that we had was absolutely wonderful. Also, real quick, I just want to say, for those who listened to the first episode and didn't watch it, you didn't see this, but for those who watched, I had like a black screen behind me, and it made me look like I was being held in a closet against my will, reading off the pre-intro announcements. And that thing was way too much work to put up just for me to look crazy. So that's why you don't see it this time. But enough about that and more about my amazing guest. My guest this episode is Cora Boyd, who is a dating relationship expert, coach, and content creator who helps modern singles develop the relationship skills they need and the self-confidence they need to thrive in their love lives. If you like Cora after this interview, which you definitely will, you should follow her at the Cora Boyd on Instagram and YouTube. She's also the host of Pillow Talk Radio, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching this or listening to this and you're like, I would love to get coaching from Cora, well, good news, there's two ways you can do so, either through Flirt Harder, aka The Art of Creating Attraction, which is her best-selling flirting school and has been seen on Yahoo Finance, NPR, Cut Video, Bustle, and so much more. Or you could do the Magnetics Love School, which is her private coaching membership, which is an ongoing learning and coaching experience aimed towards providing long-term support for members to cultivate an ever-deepening mastery in social, relational, and romantic fulfillment. I'm so excited for y'all to listen, and seriously, thank you so much for everyone, whether you watched, listened. I so greatly appreciate. Please, if you can take time out of your day to give the podcast 5 stars, give it a follow, give it a subscribe, give it a thumbs up. I know it's so dumb. I know it's annoying that everyone says this, but it truly helps us out so much when you do that and helps us get seen by more people, which I would really love and appreciate. But nonetheless, I appreciate your support and watching. Thank you so much. And without further ado, the second episode of Very Interesting. Hi, welcome to the second episode of Very Interesting with Chris Mejia. I am your host, Chris Mejia, a Seattle-based comedian. And if this is your first time listening in, this is just a podcast where I bring in people who I find either very interesting, do very interesting work, or I just want to have a very interesting conversation. Today's episode is an absolute pleasure. Well, every episode is an absolute pleasure. But this one, bringing in someone who I think is absolutely awesome. They are a love life expert, content creator. You've seen them on Yahoo Finance, Cut Video, Bustle, Dot Catalog. Basically, they've done so much work, especially on Cut Video channel. They do a lot of work in helping people develop self-confidence and a strong sense of self and creativity. They are a creator of thought leadership content and teach soft skills in the context of romance and dating and communication in the realm of relationships. Please get a lot of love to the amazing Cora Boyd, everybody. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And
of course. Thank you for coming in. I was actually thinking about it on my way here. I think we haven't seen each other since in person since I want to say when I did your live dating show pre-COVID.
Yeah.
I want to say it was maybe late 2019, early 2020.
I think it was actually February 2020.
That's right. It was a Valentine's Day thing.
So it was right before shit hit the fan.
Yeah. It was little did we know. Yeah, little did we know. We were going to a live event thinking this is how life is always going to be. Yeah. And then a month later, everything went to shit. Yeah. But, you're allowed to swear, by the way.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I probably should have told, but thank you so much for coming in. So there's so many things I would love to talk to you about. We're going to talk about the obvious thing right out of the gate, which is you do a lot of things. I don't want to narrow you down to one thing, but you are commonly known as a dating coach, and in fact, so much so that when I was doing my research, you were even named top 10 dating coaches by website Globe Newswire in 2021.
Was I?
Yes, you were. Apparently, they did not contact you.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. That's dope.
You were named top 10 of top 10 dating coaches in dating experts to like watch, and you were on that list.
That's cool.
And basically, if you don't know anything about Cora, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, you do a lot of work in helping people not only learn to be sure of themselves and be confident in themselves, but then learning how to then express that as they're navigating the realm of dating. You've previously stated that a lot of your clients, or at least you focus on providing the service towards men because of the fact that men often do not have a healthy helper. And like, how do you learn how to date? Which I think is very true.
Yeah.
I was even thinking with myself of like, growing up, I didn't really, because I had a single mom, and my brother, he was 4 years older than me. So because of that, we weren't close for most of my life until college. Mm-hmm. I didn't have like a male figure to like tell me how to date. And at that time, I wasn't really asking my friends who were women how to date and stuff. So I realized I'm like, in terms of dating, really, I had all the reference was what I saw in movies.
Yeah.
Or my guy friends who are just as dumb as me and just as ignorant. And thankfully, my older brother, even though he was a player, he was a ladies' man, he was always, the advice that he did give me was like respectful in the sense of like, walk a girl to her car, make sure that she gets home safe, open the door for her, things like that. Or like, once you get home, text her, hey, I had a great time. Hope you got home safely, kind of stuff. But that was really it. So I know this is a common question you always get. And I told you I don't want to ask common questions, but I'll allow this one. Why was it so, well, actually, I guess first question, two-parter. How did you make the conscious decision where you wanted to focus more, or whether it was purposeful or not, on helping men navigate dating?
Yeah.
What led you towards that? And then two, why did you ultimately make that decision of like, this is where, like, why was that so important for you to do that kind of work?
Yeah. Excellent questions. Thank you. Oh my God. There's a lot to that. First of all, I want to acknowledge that a lot has changed since I've been doing this work. So, and it hasn't even been that long. I mean, I've been doing this work, or I've been like in the dating realm for about 7 years now. First as a matchmaker. I worked as a professional matchmaker for 2 years, and then I started my own business. But even when I was first starting that, like, because I'm kind of at the intersection of a lot of different industries, like the coaching industry was super new. And it's not really, like, it's so much more commonplace now. Of like, when I first started, I'd be like, I'm a dating and relationship coach. I'd be like, what? Like, I got so many different reactions. So that has been interesting to see as I've evolved my work, of how like the demand for personal development spaces has increased so much, and like the supply has also increased a lot. Right. So I would say that when I started, when I started coaching exclusively men, which I did at first, now I work with, I have different offers for kind of different experiences. My romantic work primarily focuses on the hetero experience. And then I do have programs and like offers that are more friendship based, or like a lot of it is very queer friendly too, because it just focuses on human dynamics. But like definitely there's some specific like heteronormative male female dynamics that I speak a lot about. And that was a big motivator for me too, because like I was seeing, and this is like another element that has evolved and like continues to evolve in more constructive directions. But like even not that long ago, when I started my business, like 5 years ago, part of why I wanted to exclusively work with men was that I was seeing, first of all, through my market research of just like talking to people on the phone all the time as a matchmaker and setting them up on dates, and like kind of, doing that market research of understanding like frustrations, turn-ons, turn-offs, like all of these things. Like I just was hearing from so many men, like this desire of what you were describing of like, can someone just tell me what the hell is going on?
Right.
Like from a grounded place.
Right.
And so I did notice that like a lot of guys were seeking from a super sincere place, like answers and knowledge that like at that point was primarily dominated by pickup artists. And a part of a big piece, and this continues to be true in an evolved way, but like a big piece of the work that I do with people around like hetero intimate relationships is a lot of like helping men to better understand women and how to connect with women, and also helping sense like building on the work that I do with men, like starting to understand all of the ways that like women, and this is of course like hugely generalized language here, but
right.
like,
Obviously
women really
acknowledging
misunderstand men's experience too. And
right.
like, when you're looking at like what I find so interesting about studying and working in the realm of dating and like intimate relationships between people is what a microcosm it is for like every other societal dynamic. So like, of course, there's a lot of roadblocks between like, you know, if you're going to be intimate with someone, you have to feel safe and seen, you know? So there's like a lot to unpack there.
Right.
For all of us.
Right.
You know, understandably, not by like, just because of the way we've all been socialized in different ways. And like, so that was a really big piece that I saw and continue to see too, is that like, we're trying to figure out, you know, so much of like dating and romantic advice is either really kind of antiquated and like doesn't really apply to the modern landscape, or even what we're kind of creating and aspiring to, like being able to like relate to and respect each other more. But also either that, or doesn't really acknowledge some of the like really actually quite beautiful differences between men and women, and how like there are certain like polarized
right.
dynamics that are quite pleasurable for all of us. And it's not that we need to just like completely throw out like all, like there's a lot of nuance.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of like critical thinking and parsing out that one needs to do to be able to like navigate these like I really think of them as cross-cultural. I mean, I think all relationships are cross-cultural, because they are, but like I really like to bring that mindset, especially to like hetero relationships, of like, this is a cross-cultural relationship.
Right.
And like when we look at it like that, we're so much more willing to be like, I wonder, why is that person doing what they're doing? Or like, why does that appear to be really important to that? Or like, what are the customs and like, you know, and
that's actually a very good, because it's true. Like, even if two people are of the same race dating, they still come like, there's the cross-culturalness of, if it's a heterosexual relationship, the culturalness of being a man versus being a woman in our American society, where, not to use big terms and stuff, but like basically because of the patriarchy, people are the way they are, whether they know it or not, because of the way our society has been. And even though, yes, on paper, we've made progress as a society, but I think we've made progress in the sense where we're acknowledging that the patriarchalness has had an effect on things. Right. But I don't think we've actually reached a point where we're doing the inner work to like offset it. So there's that cross-cultural difference, but then it's also like, you grew up with your family thinking certain things are very normal.
Exactly.
And then when you date someone, it's not even that you're wrong or they're doing something wrong, but it's like, you're so used to like, this is my world. Or with your friends will tell you this is right, this is wrong. Yeah. Where oftentimes I feel like people run into the issue of, when they ask for advice on dating from their friends, people will be like, oh no, girl, like, he sounds terrible, dump him and all that. And she insists to stay. Or like, guys will reach out to their friends, and guys be like, oh, you can't trust her, this is that. Yeah. And then like, sometimes that ends up being bad advice because then, they leave someone who could have been great for them if they were like more willing to like take a risk and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually, I've never heard anyone like communicate it that way of like, that is true of like, yes, I think we often focus so much on the racial aspect of dating that we don't realize that the cross-culturalness is more than just ethnicity and racial identity.
Yeah.
That very much your gender and how secure you are in your sexual identity and just your relationship with sex can be a huge cross-cultural difference because some people are way more comfortable with not only just like what you do in bed, but also talking about it. And other people can be very reserved and like, I feel like each side views each other almost negatively. So that's actually, I think that's a very interesting way of wording that. And I guess in your work, because like oftentimes I feel like with a lot of industries, I mean, with any industry, no matter what you do, it's important to be on top of what's changing, how's the landscape changing and all of that. I'm assuming you probably learn a lot about how things are changing by the conversations you're having with clients. Was that cross-cultural difference something that you noticed immediately right out of the gate, or over the course of your work you started to notice as you started getting more clients and working with different people? And obviously prior to starting your own business, when you were working as a matchmaker, was that something you noticed immediately, or was that something over time you started to notice how much of an impact that had?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And yeah, just to emphasize what you said too, it's like all relationships are cross-cultural. Sometimes it's a little more like salient or like obvious than other times. But like, yeah, we have our family culture. We have the like school culture we grew up in. We have the friend culture. Like it's just a set of social norms, right? So like, and that's what I talk a lot about with my clients too, is that like, actually when you're building a relationship with someone, like you're establishing a culture of your relationship. There's like a micro culture within your relationship of like, here are our standards, like here's what flies, here's what doesn't fly, like here's our rapport, here's like our humor, like that's a little culture too.
Right.
So then to your question of like, did I notice that right away? I think so. And I think that I came to like feel more like convicted in that point of view the longer I've been doing this. But when I was matchmaking, which was such an interesting experience.
I could imagine.
Such an interesting experience.
Which quick, sorry to interrupt your answer. Just out of curiosity, is it that are you essentially a paid wingman?
Not quite. So I was essentially like a dating concierge, but I was remote. So I would get to know a client, get to know what they were looking for, and then I would interview prospects on their behalf and then create promising introductions where it felt like there might be some alignment. But there also are, and this, I was thinking this, I'm like, what piece was I grabbing onto that you were saying about like, oh yeah, well, one of the most interesting parts of dating and intimate relationships, and I include like familial relationships, like deep friendships, but like also obviously in romantic relationships, there's like there's a whole nother level of merging and like sexuality and all of these things. But it's so deeply psychological, and oh yeah, to your point of like asking your friends for advice, and then maybe they're giving advice from a different set of needs and desires and or a different cultural perspective, or
right?
So it's good to just keep that in mind, but like also we so easily self-sabotage in love, like. Because it's vulnerable as hell. It's scary. Our shit comes up. We trigger each other. We have reactions. And like that's also like the work and the depth of relationships, which is part of why it's such a like worthwhile venture to lean into. But like if you're going to do relationships in like a meaningful way, you have to lean into those elements, which means like you gotta be looking at yourself and your own shit and like not spewing your projected reactivity on your partner all the time, like, or you're gonna have a bad time.
Right.
You know, everyone's gonna have a bad time if you're doing that, and like we all do it to some extent because we're humans. But like, to your point of asking your friends for advice, like even the point of like falling in love, I see this all the time with clients, because now I am essentially a wing woman for like, but more so in the like personal development aspect of kind of offering different perspectives. And also even, this was also a big reason why I pivoted out of matchmaking too, because even what I just described to you, like people coming in with like a laundry list of what they wanted, and like a lot of times I saw how I think that it's matchmaking is it's a tool that can, when people are coming to it with a grounded, realistic mindset, can be an awesome way to meet people.
Right.
But I also think that part of the issue for a lot of people in dating and intimate relationships right now, and why so many people, and this brings me to your other question too, around like dating culture. So many people are just like, dating sucks, dating culture, blah, 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 which I understand is true to an extent. But like what I'm really interested in doing with people too is like looking at dating culture, but also like shaping dating culture.
Yeah.
Because quite honestly, I've had a fucking enough of people just like throwing up their hands talking about how much it sucks. It's like, we can influence that. You're going to have the type of dating experiences you show up for, you know, and not to say people aren't doing shitty things. I don't want to like invalidate some of those aspects, but like we've got to take some accountability for how we're actually part of the culture and how we get to shape the culture as well.
So I love that you said that, because that's something that that's been like my hot take about dating, where like, dating sucks because we're making it suck on purpose.
And because we're throwing up our hands being like, it sucks, like there's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
Versus like being a refreshing beacon and therefore like attractive to people who are on that level with you. Like, because there's so many cool people.
Right.
There's so many cool people like taking accountability for themselves and like learning how to not reactively spew their shit on other people.
And we make such rash conclusions about what someone's going to be like based off
from
of
self-sabotage,
some little thing that happens that we're like, well, this person who I previously dated who hurt me did this, so they're the same. And it's something that when I say this, people are always like, oh, well, like I don't trust men because of X, Y, and Z. I'm like, that's very valid. Like, I'm not gonna discount your experiences. Like, both, no matter their gender, I feel like people have their reservations and their concerns for rightful reasons because of their previous experiences. I think if someone is gonna have concern not because of their own experiences but because of what they hear, I mean, sure, yes, you're trying to gather warnings from other people, but I think we often use that as an excuse to just write someone off entirely, because, and understandably so, we don't want to get hurt. But in life, you can't achieve success in life without risk. And without allowing yourself the ability to fail. And like, shout out to my therapist. If you're out there, the work you do, she's a sex therapist, and she's helped me learn so much about not only, like, obviously not only my relationship with sex, but with dating in general. And that was something where I was just like, with my current girlfriend, it took me a long time to really allow her to, you know, commit, like to let her in. Because the relationship I left that ended right before I met my girlfriend, it ended with me being very damaged and in a very bad place. And previously, I have not had a lot of great luck with dating, but I always knew I didn't want it to make me jaded, because I've just heard so much about men who become, one woman hurts them, so then they use that as an excuse. So I was like, I don't want to be that. But it was very hard because I felt like I kept running into the same situations. And I was talking to my therapist about it, of like, I don't want to let someone in because it just feels like once I do, everything goes off the rails. And she was like, basically in a very therapist way, was like, you can't expect to achieve love without taking the risk that you're going to get hurt. Like that's kind of like what makes love exciting, because you have to be vulnerable and you have to put yourself in this position where you can get hurt and this person can hurt you. But also that's what's exciting about love, is that there's also a great chance that that person is going to match that energy. I'm gonna be just as vulnerable with you, and I'm also equally scared that I might get hurt. But in order for this to succeed, we have to give each other our true selves and embrace our true selves. And all of this to say, I think you make the great point of like, dating sucks because I feel like so much of what we're doing doesn't actually need to happen. Like in my 20s, hearing so much about the advice of like, don't seem too interested. And then now when I'm in my 30s, I'm like, that's the stupidest shit I have ever heard, because I want to know someone I'm dating is interested in me. And I want to express to someone that I'm interested in them. And I've definitely shifted a mindset in my 30s of, you know what, if I'm showing someone that I'm interested and that turns them off, I don't want that person in my life. Or it's also another reason why too, where whenever I see dating advice, whether it's on TikTok or whatever, and I, not to sound mean, but if it's from someone, no matter their gender, is in their 20s, I am like, I'm not going to probably take this advice seriously, or I'm not going to let this, what they're saying, anger me or have some sort of reaction, because it's like, you're in your 20s. And I feel like a lot of the stuff where I thought how you needed to navigate dating was wrong, and I look back, it was like I was just young and dumb. So like, what is like if someone, not to narrow it down to one thing, but what is like, out of all of the things that we are purposely making dating terrible, what's one that really strikes out to you of like, if you could grab all of society and just like shake their shoulders and be like, stop doing this. What's like one of the first things that really like come to mind?
Yeah, that's a great question. I also want to comment on a couple of
feel free.
Very interesting things you said.
Feel free.
Exactly what you were saying of like the vulnerability. I think what's really important to remember, and what I help people navigate, is like our unconsciousness and our consciousness, our presence, our awareness in dating. And it's like, it is high risk. It really is. And to your point, like with becoming jaded and like having had bad experiences or getting really hurt, like that shit is real. That shit has happened, right? But it's like, there's like an undercurrent that can pull us into like fear and like judgment of other people. And it's a skill to be able to like validate and acknowledge some of the realities that have occurred or like are occurring or are like present in society at large, but also realize that we do have agency in terms of what we're creating and what like how we transcend that undercurrent as well. And it's hard. Yeah. Like it's not easy, but I really believe it is possible. And like it takes courage, and it takes courage to fall in love, and it takes like awareness of realizing when you're just like, you know, unconsciously like, oh, well, this isn't going to work because of this stupid reason, or because he like likes Imagine Dragons or blah, blah. You know, like we make up this crazy shit in our head. We all do it. Right.
The trend of now, like the ick.
Yeah.
And it will always be over the littlest thing. Some icks are very valid, but like I feel like oftentimes when people talk about icks, they're over the littlest thing where it's like, you're going to write off someone because of that.
This, or because you're just making these wild assumptions about them because of X, Y, Z. When really it's our I call it ninjita, which is one of my coaches called it, which is like the self-preservation part of our mind that wants to like sabotage unfamiliar things, but like this voice comes in and is like, oh no, like this thing and this thing, which means this thing, like better end it now, or better like, you know, be a massive bitch so they break up with me, because like our unconscious runs rampant in relation, especially getting like falling in love, like opening up to someone. And a lot of people sabotage really good things. Or rush into it, or like there's a lot of ways that we can do this, but like even just having awareness that that's like a normal part of the process is to just like start thinking absolutely like whack things as a reason not to get closer to someone,
right?
And like writing someone off because of like these like imperfections or whatever. Like there's a high level of discernment that's necessary of like knowing when like, oh, actually this isn't right for me, or like this is not wise for me to like continue to invest emotionally in this person or this relationship. Because sometimes it's like our self-preservation instincts are onto something, but like they will go off when we're falling in love.
Right.
So even just having the awareness of that's actually normal. And like, I think also just like having the awareness of like our brain on love and how like also in the beginning, like we're literally high on oxytocin,
right?
Like, you know, like it, and like we're in an altered state. Like,
right.
I think, and this is what I do with people too. And just like from the experience of kind of guiding people through that chapter of like, it's normal. It's normal to go a little crazy,
right,
in various ways when we're falling in love,
right.
But it also, there are things that we can do to like stay grounded and to like set something up in the culture of the relationship that we're building that can be really awesome.
Right.
So there's a high level of like discernment and awareness that's necessary. And like, that's where I like in my classes and with my clients, these are the skills that I teach, where it's not like, it's kind of understanding the lay of the land, and understanding like the dynamics that are at play, but also like empowering yourself to be aware of what's happening for you, what may be happening for the other person.
Right.
And like, how do I, with that like informed discernment, want to navigate this moment now in like alignment with the desired outcome I want to create with this person and in my life in general, and in my love life in general. So it becomes a lot less about like the individual person in front of you and a lot more about like, how am I getting really, really good at authentically navigating relationships?
Yes. And that's actually something that resonates with me a lot, because I feel like post my last relationship and my current relationship is very much, this is the first time and actually, this is a lot largely because of a lot of the work I've been doing in therapy recently of like, I feel like we often chase after certain types of relationships because we're chasing after what we're told we're supposed to want. And then I think like for me personally, I'll speak for myself, I'm realizing, the relationships I've been in, whether they were actual relationships or they were quote unquote situationships or whatever, the ones that were the most positive experiences were people who let me be me and were interested in me because of me and not because of their idea of me or what they could change me into. A lot of people I dated who were in serious relationships like wanted to change me into what their ideal, like what their version or what they thought their ideal man was.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've had much more success with relationships, like not only realizing that about myself of like, that's what I want out of relationship, but then also doing a lot of important work on myself of like, what is me? How do I make myself happy? And to kind of pivot a little bit away from dating, but I feel like what we're about to talk about does affect dating because I feel like oftentimes we will look for relationships when we haven't even fostered a healthy relationship with ourselves. And it's a common saying of like, you shouldn't date until, you know, you've done the work on yourself, which I feel like with that, it's like you'll never be done working with yourself. So to wait till you're done is kind of counterintuitive because you will never be done. You will always have to work on yourself till the day you die. But pre-recording, we were talking a lot about how just like mental health has been a big thing really for all of us, especially ever since COVID and the pandemic, and just how I feel like the pandemic, being locked in rooms by ourselves, have really made us have to come to terms with who we are, whether we like it or not. And I feel like learning to be not only sure of yourself, but comfortable with yourself and embracing yourself, and going from an attitude, at least for myself, I've done so much of my life of what will impress people. And now I'm starting to shift more into an attitude of I'm going to be me, whether people like that or not. For yourself, because especially with the work that you do, where a lot of it is helping people navigate dating and stuff, how much do you feel like with yourself as an individual, work that you needed to do on yourself to not only be able to help others, but like help you navigate your own life? Because I feel like that's something, no matter what we all do, it's so critical that we really come to terms with the person that we see in the mirror. And like unpack how we function, what makes us tick, but then also what makes us scared, and like what stuff that we may not be proud of, and all of that, and like learning to love who we actually are and not just the good parts. What was your journey with that? And also, sorry to make this question even longer. The reason why I say this, because a podcast, and I mentioned this, that you were previously on, you talked a lot about your journey of honestly like learning to love yourself and being confident in yourself in the sense of like embracing who you were and stuff. So like, what was that journey for you? And like, how did that end up affecting just really everything else in your life?
That's such a good question. And a couple like strings I want to tie together based on what you said too, of like, you were saying earlier, you were talking about like expressing interest, and like how a lot of the advice, like the 20s advice, is like, don't come on too strong. And I think that is also like, there's a lot of discernment in that skill, but it also comes naturally as you like value yourself more. You learn to kind of temper like a genuine interest with kind of this energy of like, I like what I see so far. I'm into this, and like, let's keep seeing how it goes, versus when we're operating from a place of like not valuing ourselves. So this is a lot of what I teach too, is like a high value behaviors, which ultimately is not really about like, you know, being more, and we all have inherent value. It's about kind of like, what are behaviors that are derived from a place of valuing and respecting ourselves, and those create attraction. So a lot of like what pushes people away in dating is like low value behaviors, which are really indicative, and we can kind of read and smell the energy of like, oh, this person is like so interested in me without even really having had the time with me to know me like that. Like, what are they trying to glom onto in me? And like, what's going on there that they're like so eager to invest this much in me without that being like tempered by like reality. So a lot of inevitably, like, these are skills that you can kind of like, once you understand how things come off and the dynamics as well, like you can kind of fake it a little bit, even when you're not feeling super, you know, you can be like, I'm not going to double text right now. We all feel anxious sometimes. We all feel insecure sometimes, but like, you can understand how that's going to like come across. But also inevitably, as you behave in those ways, you're going to come to respect yourself more through something in psychology they call self-perception theory, which is like in the same way that we infer qualities about another person by observing their behaviors, we do the same thing with ourselves. So like if you see yourself conducting yourself in like self-respecting ways, like you're gonna cultivate more self-respect for yourself. So that's kind of an interesting piece to tie together, like that discernment of like there is a sweet spot of like expressing your interests, but like not coming on too strong. But like that's what's happening underneath.
Yeah.
It's not so much about like that's the energetics of it and why.
Right.
And that's where it's like it's also about cultivating a more centered relationship with yourself, such that like you, to your point, you're gonna relationships are one of the best ways to grow ourselves. And like that's why I really like approaching relationships with that intention, like in the forefront of like, how is this a playground for personal growth? Where it's ultimately about me and me via me and you.
Right.
And it's like we're both growing together. So to your point, like some people are like, as a form of sabotage, will go into that really like sequential way of thinking of like, I need to be complete with me before I can invite someone else into the mix.
Right.
And there's like a both and in that, where it's
Right.
like dating is a lot. You can do it. You can conduct yourself in dating in a lot more of an empowered way when you're centered in yourself. Like when you have an understanding and a relationship with yourself of like, here's what's okay with me. Here's
Right.
what's not okay with me.
You become
Here's
a
what I
lot
like.
more
Here's
intentional.
what exactly.
Yeah.
So that's really what I do with people is like to kind of connect with themselves through the avenue of dating and like do that personal work as they're dating. Because I really believe it can, and like, is conducive to being a simultaneous process, but there is a little bit of both and that's where the discernment comes in too. So to kind of build on that thought and answer your question, I feel like there has absolutely been kind of like a meta dynamic happening for me along these lines in relation to my work and the work that I do with people and like how I learn all of these things in my own relationships and with myself. And like, I imagine you feel this way as a performer and as like a creative enterpriser of like kind of charting your own path in different ways. And like, there's so much I can only imagine of like, the emotional intelligence and the resiliency that's required to like get on stage and like bomb and then do it again.
It's definitely not to cut you off, but I always joke where people are like, that's so cool that you do comedy. I'm like, no, I wish my dream was to be an accountant because I mean, I love it. I love comedy so much. But when comedy goes well, when a set goes well, it's truly the highest high. Like and I'm not even being hyperbolic. It's better than any drink, any drug. It's better than sex. It's better than food. Like the fact that I can get on stage and make strangers laugh when they have no reason to like me, no incentive to like me. And like they leave finding me like enjoyable because of things I thought of that I'm sharing is truly the highest high. When I bomb, it is the lowest low. Comedian Mike Birbiglia has a great joke of where, not to butcher it, but basically he's like, to do comedy, you have to be delusional because everything rides on you. So if it goes well, you're like, oh, great. But if you're in a play, you could be like, oh, well, maybe they didn't like the set or they didn't like the script. Right. But in stand-up, when you do bad, it's like, oh, we don't like you. Your personality. We don't like that. Shout out to Mike Birbiglia. Such a funny comedian. But it's very true of like, it is nice, not even from an ego standpoint, but it is nice to be like, I get to claim all of the success from my set.
Yeah.
It's not because anything, it's because of me and I get to claim that, which is nice. I feel like we often end up downplaying our own efforts and our own success.
Yeah.
Because we also in our society, I feel like we don't allow people to be confident in themselves.
Yeah.
That the second people express that, we're like, wow, what an asshole. What, they're not humble or anything like that.
Syndrome.
Right. So that is nice, but it's like, to your point where, and I'm sure with the content that you put out and what you work on and stuff, where when you're doing something where it's really like you putting yourself out there, when it's great, it's awesome and it's the most uplifting thing. But then when people either don't like it or they respond negatively to it, or if it even just doesn't pop off, it just feels much more personal. That when it hurts when it just should be like, oh, I made a burger and they didn't like it. It is what it is. Like, it feels like they almost like, oh, they don't like me. And I actually, now that I think about it, do you ever feel that with like the stuff that you put out, where like if it doesn't get the reaction you were hoping for, do you take it on kind of like a personal level?
Definitely. I like 100%. So yeah, I relate so much to all of what you're saying, and I like mad respect for performing stage. I can only imagine. I feel like I kind of relate to, it's like the same energetics in a different context.
Right.
But like I feel like yours is a little bit more volume turned up in terms of like I'm alone on a stage. Like,
I honestly would argue that it's much more similar than you would think, because like, for example, like you've already had a YouTube channel, but now you're aiming to do much more with it. And so while yes, when I am on stage, the feedback I get is instant. Like the people are right there, so I instantly, which is great, like I instantly find out, is this good or bad, which is good. But I would say you're still getting that same thing, but from a virtual aspect. And like, I can't hear what's in people's heads. I only know if they like me based in what I have to say, based off of if they laugh. Or if they heckle, which heckling doesn't really happen that often, at least for me. Whereas you see how people like it based off of a number of likes. A number of like downvotes in the comments, whether they're positive or negative. So I would even argue it's much more similar, because all I have is just one thing, which is, are they laughing? Whereas like, do I have views? Do I have likes? Do I have comments?
More metrics,
And there's much more metrics that I feel like is sure, and it's still instantaneous, because once you release it, then boom, like over the course of time. And then also on top of it, you have to hope that the algorithm is going to bless you and put your stuff in front of people. Whereas I just have to hope people show up to the show. So I would say it's much more similar than you would think.
And it's interesting, as we're talking about this too, like this is exactly the same energetic dynamic we're talking about in dating too, in a slightly different way, but like this, like, how can I be centered in myself in the face of uncertain feedback from others? Like how can I have the emotional resilience to like take it in stride and to like interpret to keep going and to also like be nice to myself. But like, I feel that all, like, to your question of like, do I experience 100%? And like, I do my best not to take it too personally. And I feel that I have like cultivated a lot of ability and resilience to do that with myself over the years of doing this. And sometimes it's easier than other times. But I do feel like the way that I have needed to develop a lot of these resiliencies and this confidence and like all of these things in the reality of like being also a human being and like working with other people in highly emotional realms, and like, you know, also to your point of like the 20s dating advice. I was 25 when I started my business.
Really?
Yeah, I'm 30 now. So I had a lot of chutzpah, and I like I feel there's a lot more depth that I bring to my work now. And I respect where I was coming. I feel like a big piece that I like to bring to the world, but that I'm also now kind of like supplementing with like more life experience and like more of a broad emotional spectrum. But like even helping people learn how to flirt, it's like a big piece that I feel that I'm here to do with people is like to help everyone have a better time.
Right.
And enjoy themselves more. And like to you too, of like the value of humor and like the value of like flirting or being able to like bring in some play, or like how these are actually like necessary tools for life and necessary tools for relationship that like may seem kind of fluffy, but are so substantial.
Right.
So I feel like when I first started out, also I was pretty young, and I like had done I had a lot of life experience in different ways, and like had a lot of dating experience in different ways, but I was also still 25, and like boundaries were a lot harder for me then, and like that would show up in my client work, and like so everything that I teach about and is a work in progress for me that like I take very seriously and work on, and also work on like through the avenue of my work, and because that's me relating to people. And so like my own shit would come up, or like sometimes I get triggered by things, or like, I was always doing my best, but like certainly have had imperfect moments.
Right.
So yeah, it's just a whole meta version of everything we're talking about.
And so and from that, because especially you're like, when I first met you, very much your life seemed, I didn't know you well, but it seemed like a lot of the work you did was primarily focused on the dating coaching that you would do.
Yeah.
And pre-recording, we were talking a little bit about how you've been pivoting to doing more than just that, and doing all kinds of work. And I feel like whenever we are pivoting into something, it kind of can cause almost like an identity crisis, because for so long we've based, these are my skills and I'm good at this thing, and I need to be as good at this thing as possible. And sometimes when we pivot, for whatever the reason may be, it kind of takes this, I don't want to say toll on our mental, but more so it's like a knee jerk on our mental of like, I always thought I was supposed to do this thing, and then now I have to venture into something new that may or may not be something I'm familiar with, and then it's like I have to be vulnerable again. I have to put myself out there in a way that I'm not used to.
Yeah.
And it can be exciting because it's like a new challenge, and we're kind of feeling the same anxiety and fears that we felt when we were first starting out. So it's kind of like you feel alive again.
Yeah.
But then it's also, anxiety is not fun. It's scary, and it's scary to put yourself out there, and it may not get a reception. So one thing I wanted to ask for you is like, what have been the steps you've been taking to make sure as you're pivoting, you're okay?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think to your point, like it's pivoting in any aspect, whether it's professionally, creatively, romantically, it can be extremely existentially confronting. So like what you're saying, and like what has been very much my experience through different iterations, is like you're evolving your identity. And that to answer your question, I feel like what is really helpful to me in like these existential confronting questions that can be kind of like destabilizing to the identity, or like this is how I've known myself, like this is how the world knows me, this is what I'm supposed to be, of like kind of being really intentional with like the language I use to speak about myself with myself and with other people, but also recognizing that like I contain multitudes, as do we all, and like it's really not it's really about like what's at the heart of what I want to do in life and in the world and like in this lifetime. Like, what are the skills that I have that I've been evolving and will continue to evolve, and like how do I want to engage those in maybe ways that might look a little bit different than they did before, or honestly might not even look that different to other people, but like feels really different,
Right.
because we more than anyone will like box our like Chris, me comedian, Chris dating coach. It's like then the little like part of self is like, I'm more than a dating coach. You know, it's like, but at the end of the day, it like doesn't matter what people are like you know, we're just kind of doing our thing, and
right.
So I feel like what is helpful to me in that, and like what I have come up against in myself, and sometimes like very uncomfortable ways, and like ultimately now more constructive ways, is
right.
just like I'm just Cora, and I do a lot of things. I have these skills. I care about these messages. It's more about like what is the transmission that I want to like put out into the universe,
right?
And like that gets to look a lot of different ways. So kind of like attaching the roles from my identity helps me feel a lot more freedom to evolve that as my spirit needs to evolve that. Because like we can't keep doing the same shit in the same way again and again.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, that is what is really helpful for me on that front, is like detaching or not like also not giving myself as many identity roles, and or if I do, like letting it be one of many. Like
right.
Chris, the podcaster. I podcast now. Like I do this now. I do that now.
Right.
Fucking deal with it.
Right.
Try to figure me out.
Right.
Have fun.
And like I'm sure, and unfortunately we're running out of time, so we'll have to wrap up. But I could talk to you for hours, and in a future season would love to have you come back on, because there was so much that I wanted to talk to you about that we didn't get to. But to kind of wrap up on your final point of like, I feel like, and this is something I'm trying to learn with myself, of like pivoting is more like it creates more freedom than
more of
that we think.
Expansion
yeah.
than another box, or ideally.
Exactly. Like it ends up allowing you to realize you shouldn't even, because I feel like we often, like, yes, people view us as one thing, but then we end up only viewing ourselves as one thing. And like, even though the pivot is scary, it ends up being enriching and uplifting, where it's like, I am more than just this thing. And that just, I feel like just leaks into all aspects of life, of like for example, like with dating and relationships, like I'm more than just the surface level desirable traits of like X height, I make this money, I look like this, or like with our career, where it's like I'm more than just my job, or just like I'm more than just someone who creates content. It's like realizing I'm allowed to be this complex human, and I'm allowed to embrace all of these aspects about me. And I feel like that realization slowly allows to like to create that self-love of like, I am more than just one thing, which is great, because then when that one thing's not going well, you get to be like, but there's so many other things that I bring to the table. And then obviously when that one thing is going great, it's like, cool, like I already feel good because this thing that I've based my identity on is going well. But unfortunately we're at time, so we have to wrap up. I genuinely could talk to you for hours. Thank you so much for coming on. If people liked the things you said and the way you said it, where can they follow you online? One, can they follow you online? And if so, where should they go? Whether it's just social media or if there's another platform, what's the best way to continue to take in the stuff that you do?
Yes. Well, thank you very much. I too thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Perfect.
And look forward to another one. Thank you for watching, people at home, at the gym, wherever you are. I'm Cora Boyd. You can find me on the internet, on Instagram at the Cora Boyd, the Cora Boyd. My website at the Cora Boyd. And that's where I have a lot of on-demand classes as well. You can also join my membership, Magnetics Love School, if you want to go deeper with me. And subscribe to my YouTube channel, please. It's my new venture for the year, also at the Cora Boyd. So you can find me everywhere with that at THE Cora Boyd.
Perfect. If you liked me, well, I would assume so, because that's how you found this podcast. But if you found this podcast not knowing me, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Chris Mejia Comedy, at Topher Mejia on Twitter and Twitch. And this podcast will most likely not have a own page for a little bit, at least for this first season. But once it is, you'll figure out where to follow it. But Cora, thank you so much for coming. And seriously, this was such a delight. And as we leave our parting segment, which name is a work in progress, but I'm temporarily calling it assigning our listeners homework, where essentially you say, hi, my name is Cora, and I'm going to leave you with this. And you are basically whatever you would like to leave the audience with, whether it's, once again, plugging your stuff, something, recapping something that we talked about, or just something we didn't get to talk about that you really want the audience to know. And it is your space to say whatever. So as we are parting, thank you very much for listening. You have the floor.
Okay. I'm going to think about this for like 30 seconds. Hi, I'm Cora Boyd, and I'm going to leave you with this. Yeah, I feel like the sentiment I really want to hit home, aside from coming and saying hi to me on the internet at the Cora Boyd everywhere, is just that you have a lot more agency than you're often giving yourself credit for, whether that is in dating and the kinds of relationships that you want to be having, or career-wise, creatively, the kinds of things you want to be making, the kinds of people you want to be around. And when you start to pursue what actually lights you up, it can feel kind of pursue and also create what lights you up. It can feel kind of daunting at first because it feels like a lot of energy and exertion. But like as you begin receiving and experiencing more of what you want, you're going to be fed energy and you're going to feel so much aliveness and momentum. So you have more agency than you think. That's it.
I love that. I love that so much. Cora, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, listening, or watching. I love you dearly, and I appreciate you. Have a great day, everybody.